The final split came soon thereafter. Yvonne Stacy and Merrill Smith resigned because of, quote, internal strife among the members of the colony and difficulty with the management of the concession. She told the press she already had paid $30,000 down on a 400-acre tract in the Cuyamacas, where she planned a nudist colony so deluxe that all others would look like camping out parties. First, though, she would tour the USA, preaching the benefits of heliotherapy to the clothes-bound masses. Apparently, the show staggered but didn't close. The standard listing all summer had been Zorine and a colony of accredited nudists. It wasn't until late October that the billing changed to Zoe. And it wasn't until November 3rd that a new queen was crowned. She was Ruth Cubbits, 20. A plush blonde who came from a whole family of nudists. 2 nights later, on November the 5th, shortly before midnight, a San Diego Union photographer found the colony huddled around their fire pit, bravely discussing how their healthy skin kept them warm. The expo closed 5 days later. The final attendance was announced as 4,784,811. The 5 most popular admission shows were the Midget Village with 375,000 paid, Zoro Gardens with 360,000, the Hollywood Hall of Fame 350,000, the Old Globe Theater 327,000, and the Indian Village 225,000. Very few specific financial documents have survived, but there are some letters from Stanley Graham at the Central Public Library. He says the deal was 15% of the gate after $4,000 for construction expenses to the expo. He figured his weekly expenses would be $1,000. It's unclear who absorbed construction expenses of $19,000 and who paid Requa's architectural fees $211.78, or how the profit from those photos and postcards was distributed. But simple arithmetic shows that Graham and Eagle probably made a net profit of around $100,000 for the 1935 alone. After the decision to continue a second year, Wayne Daliard, assistant manager of the expo, announced that all the concession spaces were sold and changes would be made. The midgets were gone, along with the girly shows on the Midway and in Gold Gulch. A new children's area, sounding a lot like Disneyland, would be launched, and Zoro Gardens would have a new version with dignity and beauty. Protests followed at the end of January, led by a coalition of the National Council of Catholic Women, the Women's Civic Center, and, my favorite, the San Diego Braille Club. They demanded an end to the indecent or immoral shows as so flagrant the first year. Daliard replied that the new Zoro Garden show would be nothing like the 1935 Exposition. Instead, it would be, quote, a play of lights on beautiful figures, completely within the new city ordinance concerning such shows. Here's the no-nonsense expo policy. But just in case, the expo asked the city council to rule on this matter. The council said they wouldn't get involved and that any problems would be handled by the police. The police chief said, more or less, that, well, it certainly looked like to him a play of light on beautiful figures. When the second season of the expo opened February the 12th, Zoro Gardens was ready to roll. In place of Zorine, there was the Cubbit family, the Cubbit family of Indiana, 4 sisters and their mom who followed the original show out from Chicago. Their names vary a bit according to the source, but the San Diego City Directory of 1936 had them as Mother Anna, plus Diane, Eleanor, Florence, and Ruth, with various occupations, all living at 3691 Jackdaw Street in Middleton. an odd garage apartment which is still standing. Ruth was the holdover queen, but she was challenged by Mary Pomeroy, an unrelated nudist. Within days, Florence Cubitt, her name changed to Tanya because, quote, it sounds more sexy, was in the race. Yeah, that's the family there. That's Tanya standing in the center and Ruth stretched out in front. Diane and Eleanor probably are among the others there. Everybody rapidly found that 19-year-old Tanya was a natural. She was a tall blonde with a cheerful outdoor look, and she knew what the press boys wanted to hear. Quote, "I wish I'd brought my knitting," she said on February the 16th. "I live for knitting," unquote. She had a plot to catch, she said, to catch King Adolf napping and knit his beard into a collar. Can't make this stuff up, folks. She also said that she enjoyed reading. Nietzsche and Schopenhauer were her preferences. Until March 1st, admission would still be 25 cents. Then it would increase to 40 cents. There was a new physical director, short, dark George Barr from the Crimea, who actually led some exercises. And there was politicking for the Queen job. It was announced that Queen Elizabeth from the Globe would decide. She decreed some kind of contest. About this time, the promoters probably took a closer look at Tanya, as will we, because they flew her off to New York, where they were negotiating, vainly as it turned out, for a spot in the 1939 World's Fair. Tanya gave interviews at her hotel room in the nude. So she got a lot of ink. The World Telegram's Joseph Mitchell, later a famous writer for The New Yorker, did a classic interview available in his book, My Ears Are Bent. He delighted in Tanya, and she told him how she and her sisters giggled at the tourists and scorned the nutty male nudists. Why, she said, those guys eat peas right out of the pod. They squeeze juice out of vegetables and drink it, and they don't even eat salt. She preferred her mother's, quote, big old steaks and French fried potatoes, though she has enjoyed the champagne and lobster in New York. She wasn't on message, but she was getting the coverage, and the promoters had her stop for more of the same at several airports on the flight back to San Diego. Well, the contest was over. Tanya was chosen queen, and she was carried through the expo to her coronation in a sedan chair, followed by herald trumpets. For the rest of the year, reporters sought Tanya out on a slow news day. She told the San Diego Sun about avoiding bees, about posing for artists. She noted that when the wind blew the skirts of a drunken woman patron, all the men ogled her instead of the nudes. Said Queen Tanya, quote, one of those psychologists would have a picnic down here, unquote. It was a line that was stolen from Joseph Mitchell's New York interview. The show was no longer listed in the Expo's daily bulletin, but it was very much still there. In this San Diego Union, its ad came between the Old Globe and the San Diego Zoo, then as now leading cultural institutions. When the Expo imported the notorious Sally Rand to do her fan and bubble dances, several times daily, free of charge, in a special stage on the Plaza de Panama, Queen Tanya sent the usual offer of tea. Miss Rand, a consummate professional in the early part of a long and distinguished career, would have none of it. Quote, the nude is my business suit, she said. I never appear socially in it, unquote. Other than a suspiciously press agent type picketing event, there was no further connection between the garden and Sally Rand. The world watched from afar. A woman arrested in San Francisco for stealing costumes claims she was Zorita of the Expo nudist colony. True Confessions magazine ran a lurid tale by Zorita, queen of the San Diego nudist, who claims her beauty replaced her childhood illness because of the sun. And from upstate New York came a sad wire service story that the real Zorine and, quote, 6 of her nudist girls, unquote, were hauled into court, where Zorine offered to do the show for the judge to prove its innocence. As the year and the expo wound down, the wrangling over demolition costs and division of receipts began. Zoro Gardens closed temporarily on August the 27th, but hadn't reopened when the expo itself shut down forever, September the 9th. Maybe Zoro Gardens was nothing more than a human zoo exhibit, but it really did happen. The first and only nudist camp open to the public. Historians of the movement agree. Yvonne Stacy really worked here. The Cubitt family drew several paychecks. The publicists listed nudists from around the world, and some of them did look exotic. One of the guys was a graduate dietitian from Michigan State. The late Bob Cleater often claimed that at least 2 of the ladies had gone to Point Loma High School with him. The late Delza Martin, a mainstay at the Old Globe Theater, told of working late one night in the Globe costume shop in 1939 with Craig Noel and Faye Emerson. They were startled by a noise and saw an old man, hairy and nude, peeping in. When they ran to the door, he loped off into the Balboa underbrush. King Adolf, I bet. Saddest of all, though, were the later accounts of Queen Zorine. She stayed on the road with her show. As these clippings from 1939 to 1950 indicate, from 22 down to 14 girls, she ratcheted downward to a duo act with a guy in a gorilla suit. Nudist history says she died in 1954 of a lingering cardiac illness. I much prefer to remember Yvonne Stacy from happier moments, when she made the most improbable of shows actually happen. Right here in Balboa Park. To me, she'll always be Queen Zorine of Zoro Gardens.